Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into Urja Global Limited's third quarter financials for fiscal year 2025.
Oh, yeah.
You sent over their disclosures
Yeah.
and, even
Yeah.
more importantly, their independent auditor's review.
Right.
And that's where things get really juicy.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the real story is.
So Urja Global is playing in two really hot sectors right now.
Uh-huh.
Electric vehicles and renewable energy products. Sounds promising.
Sounds great on paper.
Right. But there's a twist.
Okay.
They held a board meeting back on January 13th, 2025, and it seems like the results weren't all sunshine and roses.
I see.
That's where this independent auditor, Uddamabuwala Ghosh and Associates, comes in.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, they didn't exactly give Urja Global a gold star.
So they didn't get a good report.
No, they did not.
Okay.
They issued what's called a qualified opinion on the financial statements.
Uh-oh.
Now, for anyone who isn't fluent in accounting jargon, a qualified opinion is kind of like the auditor saying, hey, something's fishy here. I can't vouch for these numbers.
Yeah, it's basically a giant red flag.
Yeah, it's a big red flag that something might be seriously wrong.
For sure.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
The auditor's report basically reads like a laundry list of financial and compliance issues. Missing documents, unrecorded debts and loans that seem to have magically avoided accruing interest. It's enough to make your head spin.
Wow.
The missing documents are particularly concerning.
Okay.
The auditor specifically flagged a lack of evidence for Urja Global's investments in mining projects, as well as documentation for loans they've handed out.
Oh, wow.
The company's explanation. They blame a raid by the GST department back in 2021, where records were supposedly seized.
So wait, a raid happened over 2 years ago?
Yeah, back in 2021.
And they're saying they haven't been able to, reconstruct or replace these crucial documents in all that time.
That's what they're saying.
Okay, something doesn't add up here.
Yeah, it seems a little suspicious. And this lack of documentation makes it incredibly difficult for the auditor to verify key information about the company's investments and financial dealings.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Right. Like, how are you supposed to even begin to figure this out?
That's essentially what the auditor is facing here.
I see.
And that's not even the half of it. We also have these GST input tax credit reversals,
Okay.
which is a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
But essentially means Urja Global was taking tax benefits they weren't entitled to because of delayed payments to their creditors.
Oh, so they were kind of double dipping.
Yeah, essentially. And we're talking about a whopping 45.12 crore rupees.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Now, Urja Global is claiming this is just a temporary hiccup, a contingency they expect to resolve.
Uh-huh.
But still, it raises serious questions about their financial practices and whether they're playing by the rules.
Right, so are they just being sloppy or something more nefarious going on?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we've got missing documents and potential tax violations.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole issue of loans, about 4.11 crore rupees worth
Mm-hmm.
to individuals and corporate entities.
Okay.
And get this, the auditor says Urja Global hasn't bothered to collect interest on any of these loans,
Oh, really?
including a massive $37.2 rupee loan from a promoter company. I mean, come on. Who lends that kind of money and doesn't charge interest?
That's so bizarre. Like, what's the catch?
Right. It's highly unusual, to say the least.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about the nature of these relationships and whether these are truly legitimate loans or something else entirely.
Right. Are these actually loans or are they like favors or something?
Yeah, it's getting pretty shady, isn't it?
It is.
And then there are these ghost debtors, over 1.5 crore rupees owed to Urja Global by people or companies for whom they don't even have basic contact information.
Wait, so they don't even know who owes them money?
That's what the auditor's report says.
How are you supposed to collect a debt if you don't know who owes you money?
Right. It just doesn't make any sense.
This is wild.
This lack of basic information points towards a potential lack of internal controls and financial discipline within the company.
Yeah, like, are they just not paying attention to what's going on?
It's a sign that they might not be managing their finances effectively, which is a huge red flag for any business, let alone one that's publicly traded.
Yeah, this is not a good look.
So we've got missing documents, questionable loans, unrecorded debts, and potential tax violations. What does this all mean for Urja Global and its investors?
Well, the auditor's qualified opinion is a very serious matter. It casts a shadow of doubt over the accuracy of the financial statements and the company's overall financial health implication. Investors would be wise to approach these numbers with a healthy dose of skepticism.
But it gets worse.
Oh no, what else?
The auditor also highlighted that a huge chunk of what Urja Global is owed and what they owe others has been outstanding for over 6 months.
Seriously.
We're talking over 72.23 crore in receivables and a staggering 47.10 crore in payables.
So they're not paying their bills and they can't collect on what people owe them?
That's a lot of money stuck in limbo. It raises serious concerns about Urja Global's ability to manage its cash flow. Basically, it means they're having trouble getting people to pay their bills, which is never a good sign.
Right, and it could be a sign they're having problems paying their own bills too.
Exactly.
So it's a double whammy.
And a double whammy, trouble collecting what's owed to them and trouble paying what they owe to others. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Totally. It can create this vicious cycle where a company is constantly scrambling just to keep its head above water.
And if that wasn't bad enough, there's this whole other layer of trouble brewing notices and summons from various government agencies.
Oh boy, what now?
The auditor flagged notices from GST income tax and even SEBI, India's securities regulator.
Wow, it's like they're playing regulatory whack-a-mole.
So it looks like Urja Global is tangled up in a whole web of potential legal and financial issues. And you know what they say where there's smoke?
There's usually fire. These notices indicate potential violations of a whole bunch of rules and regulations, and that could mean hefty fines and penalties down the road. It seems Urja Global might have been claiming input tax credits they weren't entitled to.
And then there's that SEBI notice. You know how companies have to be upfront with investors about what's going on? Well, it seems Urja Global might be playing a bit fast and loose with those rules.
The auditors specifically mentioned non-compliance with some key disclosure requirements, the kind that govern how companies communicate with their investors about big events and their financial performance.
So basically, they might not be telling the whole story. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it?
Not really. It raises some serious questions about corporate governance and transparency. When a company isn't being upfront with its investors, it erodes trust and makes it hard to assess the company's true financial health. It's like trying to invest in a company that's wearing a disguise.
You know, when you lay it all out like that, it's hard not to be a little bit worried.
Hmm.
We've got missing documents, questionable loans, unpaid bills, potential tax violations, and now this regulatory scrutiny. It's like Urja Global is walking a tightrope over a pool of sharks.
It's definitely a risky situation, but it's important to remember that Urja Global's management has acknowledged the auditor's concerns and says they're working to fix things. They claim they're gathering the missing documents, resolving those tax disputes, and figuring out how to manage those outstanding payables and receivables.
So they're saying they're cleaning up their acts, but talk is cheap, right?
Actions speak louder than words, absolutely. Investors need to see concrete evidence that Urja Global is actually taking meaningful steps to get its financial and regulatory house in order.
Okay, so let's say they're serious about turning things around.
Yeah.
What would that even look like? What specific actions would they need to take to regain investor confidence?
Well, for starters, they need to address those concerns the auditor raised head-on. That means providing the missing documentation for their investments, loans, and advances. And they need to show some real progress in resolving those tax disputes and come up with a solid plan for managing all that money they owe and are owed.
So basically, they need to stop saying they're going to fix things and actually start fixing them.
Exactly. And it's not just about appeasing the auditors, it's about building a foundation for sustainable growth and regaining the trust of investors, employees, and everyone else who has a stake in the company's success.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in all the financial details, but we can't forget that there are real people behind these numbers. What could all of this mean for Urja Global's employees, suppliers, and customers?
That's such an important point. The financial health of a company has a ripple effect on everyone connected to it. If Urja Global can't get its act together, it could lead to job losses, strained relationships with suppliers, and even disruptions in service for customers.
So it's not just about numbers on a balance sheet, it's about people's livelihoods and well-being.
Precisely. And that's why it's so crucial for the company's management to prioritize transparency, accountability, and responsible financial management. They need to make decisions that are in the best interests of all stakeholders, not just a select few.
So what about the company's future? Can they actually bounce back from this, or are they headed for a financial meltdown?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's too early to say for sure.
It's like we're at a crossroads. One path leads to recovery, the other to potential disaster. Which way will Urja Global go?
Their future hinges on their ability to address those issues raised by the auditor, restore investor confidence, and prove that they're committed to doing business the right way.
They've got a lot of work to do.
Mm.
What can investors and the public do to hold Urja Global accountable and ensure they're taking the right steps?
Investors can engage directly with the company's management. They can attend shareholder meetings, ask tough questions, and make their voices heard. They can also reach out to regulatory bodies like SEBI and demand greater transparency and oversight.
So they can use their influence to push for positive change. What about the average person who's not necessarily an investor? Is there anything they can do?
Absolutely. Everyone can stay informed about the company's actions and make conscious choices about whether to support them as a customer or supplier. Public pressure can be a powerful force for change.
So it's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in holding companies accountable for their actions.
Exactly. The Urja Global case is a perfect example of why it's so important to look beyond the surface. Financial statements and auditors' reports might seem dry and technical, but they can reveal a lot about a company's culture, ethics, and commitment to sustainable business practices.
This reminds me of something else the auditor pointed out, and it might seem like a small detail, but it's actually pretty important.
Yeah.
They mentioned some outstanding tax liabilities for Urja Global.
Right. According to the income tax portal, the company has over 6.41 crore rupees in outstanding tax liabilities from previous years.
And there's more. There's also this thing called a TDS liability of 2.51 lakh rupees.
Now, for those who aren't tax experts, TDS stands for tax deducted at source. It's basically a system where the person making a payment deducts a certain amount of tax before handing over the money and deposits it with the government on behalf of the recipient.
So it's like prepaying taxes.
Exactly. And if Urja Global has outstanding TDS liabilities, it means they haven't properly deposited the taxes they were supposed to deduct from payments made to others.
So another example of sloppy bookkeeping and potential compliance issues, when you look at the overall picture, it's hard not to feel a little skeptical about Urja Global's claims that they're addressing these problems.
I understand your skepticism. There's a lot of, we're working on it, and it's just a contingency coming from the management. But until they provide concrete evidence that they're making real progress, it's wise to remain cautious.
So what does all this mean for the average person? Let's say you're considering investing in Urja Global or even just doing business with them as a customer or supplier. What should you take away from all of this?
Well, it's clear that Urja Global's latest financials are far from a clean bill of health. That qualified opinion from the auditor, combined with all those financial and regulatory red flags, suggests the company struggling with some serious internal control and compliance issues.
So it's buyer beware.
Exactly. Don't just take the company's word for it. Dig into the financial statements, read that auditor's report carefully, and consider the potential risks involved before making any decisions.
And on that note, I think we're ready to wrap up this deep dive into Urja Global. As always, knowledge is power. And we hope this has equipped you with the information you need to navigate the sometimes murky world of financial reporting.
Remember, the financial health of a company has implications far beyond its investors. It can impact employees, suppliers, customers, and even the broader economy.
So stay informed, stay curious, and keep asking those tough questions. Until next time, happy diving. It's almost like they're trying to sweep these tax issues under the rug. They're saying these penalties have been cleared by the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals, but they still haven't bothered to update the records on the government portal. It makes you wonder what else they might be overlooking.
Yeah, that's not a good sign. It certainly doesn't paint a picture of a company that's on top of its game when it comes to financial management and compliance. And remember, these tax liabilities date back to the 2012-13 and 2013-14 financial years. That's a long time to have unresolved tax issues.
It's just one more piece of evidence that suggests there might be a pattern of negligence or even deliberate disregard for financial regulations at Urja Global.
And that's something investors and anyone else considering doing business with them should take very seriously.
So, left with all the pieces together, we've got missing documents, questionable loans, unrecorded debts, potential tax violations, regulatory scrutiny, and a track record of delayed payments. It's a pretty concerning picture, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely not a picture of financial stability and responsible management. While the company's management has said they're working to address these issues, they haven't provided a lot of specifics about how they plan to do that.
So what's the bottom line for you? If you were advising someone about whether to invest in Urja Global, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them to proceed with extreme caution. There are just too many red flags here to ignore. This deep dive has revealed a company that's facing some very serious challenges, and it's unclear whether they'll be able to overcome them.
So before you jump into anything with Urja Global, do your homework.
Exactly. Don't just rely on the company's PR spin. Dig deeper, read between the lines, and make sure you're comfortable with the level of risk involved.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Urja Global. We've covered a lot of ground today, and it's been a real eye-opener.
It just goes to show that financial statements and auditors' reports can be treasure troves of information if you know how to read them. They can give you a much clearer understanding of a company's true financial health and its approach to corporate governance.
And as we've seen with Urja Global, those insights can be invaluable when making investment decisions or even just deciding whether to do business with a particular company.
So remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about a company's financial dealings, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions.
That's a great takeaway for our listeners. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.